Blessed be everyone. Welcome to another YouTube Live. Today we're just going to talk about, I'm going to talk about my experiences when I first, what motivated me to promote it. Hang on, what's going on here? Okay, so I just got distracted by something on the screen. Okay, let's start again. Welcome to the live stream. The problem with the live streams is all sorts of weird things start happening and it's live, so I can't edit it. So welcome to the live stream. I'm talking today about my witchcraft journey, how I came to witchcraft and Wicca, just to share it with those of you who may not have heard the story before, and maybe just to add some things that I may not have talked about before, just simply because I might have forgotten about them, so that maybe you can resonate with this, maybe you can relate to it. If you're new to the craft, you might be able to see, that you're not unusual or strange, um, however you came to the craft, or that you're interested in the craft, or that you may be transitioning from one sort of religious paradigm to another one, and how that happened. I'll talk about that with me, and also about how you can start your witchcraft practice if you are very keen to learn Wicca and witchcraft and you do want to work with somebody like myself, and where we can go from there. Now, first off, if you are curious about witchcraft, you do want to know where to start your practice, and you're just not quite sure where, I'm going to put a link in the chat to my free webinar. It is called How to Start Your Witchcraft Practice. You can also find the links under the YouTube video itself in the description field. And just go there, it'll go to my website, and you'll be able to sign up for my free masterclass, webinar, whatever you want to call it, and figure out how to start your witchcraft practice on your own. So that can be using all of the things that you've collected so far, what you've read so far, and just being able to put it together in a way that's going to be easier for you to start learning the craft. So I'm just grabbing that link now. And for those of you who are new, welcome to the live stream. Welcome to the channel itself. And what you'll find here, for those of you who don't know who I am or what I do, we talk all things witchcraft, Wicca, magic, shadow work, a lot about Hecate these days, and also some tarot as well, because these are the things that I teach, and some of the major deities that I work with, I talk about those. And there's heaps of videos on this channel. I've got playlists on things that are new to witchcraft. I've got other playlists on shadow work and magic and spell crafting itself, those sorts of things. So have a look at the channel. So hello, everybody. Hello, Luciano. Hi, J-Dog, Topaz, Donamius, Holly, Sandy, blessings. Shannon, blessings. Andrew, Mary Meet, and Lewis, welcome. Okay, we'll get started straight away, because I know when I'm on a live, I don't like people to sort of be waiting around for too many people to join. I do know that YouTube can take time to get the notifications out to people. And if you want to know how to get onto a live, then hit the notification bell, and also subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss them. I also let people know about a week ahead or a few days ahead that a live's coming on my newsletter list. So if you do want to sign up for my newsletter, there's a number of different ways you can get on that. You can download one of the masterclasses, sign up for that, and just tick the box to say that you still want to hear me, and you'll go onto my newsletter. Or you can just click on the newsletter link in the description field below the video and tick that you still want to hear from me, and I will send you that newsletter. It comes out once a week, letting you know what videos are out and anything new that might be happening. Okay, so for people who don't know, I've been on the witchcraft trail sort of on and off for over 30 years now. It's probably getting close to 40. And I started back in the early 1990s. And before that, I was actually a Christian. And kind of a liberal one, not a fundamentalist one. I had a Catholic upbringing, and I wasn't very keen on the Catholic upbringing because I found it, in my experience, was I grew up in Catholic schools, and in those days there were still lots of nuns and priests. Unfortunately, two of the priests that were at two of my primary schools ended up being convicted of certain crimes that I don't think we're allowed to mention on YouTube. And the nuns were, some of them were nice, but others were just absolutely dragons. Like they were just horrendous. And the teachings that were part of my schooling back then in Catholicism were pretty much, Big Daddy God in the sky, you better do what you're told, you're going to get punished. Uh, I couldn't really see where the loving God thing came in because of the fire and brimstone aspect to the type of Catholicism I grew up in anyway, which is pretty standard Roman Catholicism. So when I sort of chose my own version of Christianity before coming into witchcraft, I was much more liberal in the way that I saw things, and I tried to go more towards the loving side of the fence with it. Um, and it wasn't till, well, I was 14 when I first came across witchcraft and Wicca itself, the actual word Wicca, and I enjoyed reading that book. I was very open to the whole concept of Wicca just being another religion, and even though I was Christian at the time, I was still very open to other religions. I never had this thing that, we're right and everyone else is wrong, which a lot of, unfortunately, still in this day and age, they have. Not all of them, but a lot of them still have that attitude. So I came across witchcraft again when I was around 21, 22, when my sister and I came across a house that had a veranda, and a lot of houses where I live have verandas because we live in a hot climate. And on the veranda, there was a decorative carving of a woman sitting on top of a cauldron. And as soon as I saw it, I thought back to the book that I'd read back when I was 14. And I said to my sister, this is like a witch's house. And it was a bit because it was a green color. The house was painted a khaki green, so it really blended in with the foliage. And it was very cottage-like, and it had a red door. And I just thought the colors, for some reason, the darkness of the khaki coloring, the carving of the woman on top of a cauldron, and the way it blended in with the foliage around it, like it really was almost a tree house, or it was trying to blend in with nature. It just felt like a witch's cottage, and I sort of got all nostalgic. And I mentioned it to my sister, and then after we'd done whatever we had to do there that day, we actually went to what was called the Aquarian bookstore at the time, and she bought a book on tarot, and I bought a book on Wicca. And it rekindled her interest in these things too, because she was actually, being my older sister, she used to bring home all these books from what was called the Circle Bookshop back in the day. And the Circle Bookshop was an occult bookshop and New Age bookshop as well. So it had all sorts of things on occultism and the New Age and all kinds of stuff. And she'd bring home books because she had an interest in this too, and I used to read them all, so I was very aware of these, esoteric subjects, and so we went to the Aquarium bookstore, which was a little bit more new age than the Circle bookstore, and I bought a Scott Cunningham's book, The Truth About Witchcraft Today, and that book was just, I couldn't put it down. It's not a big read, it's quite an easy read, but I just couldn't put the book down. Everything about it absolutely resonated with me. He had a couple of spells in there. I gave them a couple of spells a go, particularly the money spell, and started collecting things for ritual. I bought his second book, which was Wicca, A Guide for the Solitary Practitioner, which is like a very mini book of shadows. There wasn't a lot of books around in those days on Wicca and witchcraft, so these were the main ones that I had access to. I bought Raymond Buckland's book, the big blue book, which I think is called The Complete Book of Witchcraft. And there were a couple of other books on witchcraft that were very natural magic oriented. There was one by Patti Slade. I can't remember the name of it. I think it was called Natural Magic. And then there was Good Magic by, I think it was Maria Medici, or I can't remember her name. And they were, in those days, because you're talking 80s, 90s, Wicca was very much being, put out there as a very positive religion. Witchcraft was put out there as being a very positive religion. And a lot of people back then were talking about, we don't curse people, we don't do any of that stuff. It's all about, connecting to nature and, honoring the seasons and going back to our ancestral religious practices of Northern Europe. And it was very benign, very, very positive things coming out during those times. And I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the whole nature connection. I really fell in love with bringing back the feminine, because I'd come from that Catholicism and it was very patriarchal. And even though I have noticed the Catholics are trying to move on from that, and they are bringing a little bit more of the feminine into it, it's still, when I was coming through it, very patriarchal. It was very focused on, daddy God in the sky kind of thing. And there wasn't anything really understood about the feminine aspect of the Holy Spirit or anything like that. Just that Catholics in general, particularly women, have a huge connection to Mary. And I see that as the goddess aspect coming through Catholicism, because the early Catholics had to bring Mary in more, because people were still very attached to working with the mother goddess, particularly Isis. And so they did have to bring her in more so that they could convert the pagans. So I felt very connected to the feminine aspect because I hadn't experienced it in my religious upbringing. And I just loved that idea of the masculine and the feminine being equal, and also honoring the differences. So that was kind of the start. It felt like I'd come home to something. And it took me a transition. I had to transition from Christianity to witchcraft. So at the beginning of my journey, I was working with the god and goddess as Mary and Jesus, as the god and goddess aspects of the masculine and feminine aspects. And I remember the day that I realized that the Christian concept of the devil or Satan didn't exist. It was like a huge awakening that did not exist. And I remember being a teenager and sometimes waking up in the middle of the night and being so afraid of the devil when I was a teenager because of my religious upbringing. And so it was a real liberation and a real sense of freedom when I realized that that character did not exist. It wasn't real. And it was just like an awakening, just a knowing. And then a few months after that, there was this realization that the Christian God didn't exist either. And that was another awakening, that the way that they viewed it, or the way that I perceived they viewed it anyway from my upbringing in Catholicism, it just wasn't true. The fire and brimstone God was not real. And that was a huge relief, an incredible relief. So, all up, from when I started practicing Scott Cunningham's stuff and sort of like doing a hybrid of Catholicism and Wicca, it was around about a 6-month process of transition from the Catholicism to witchcraft. And it was something that just progressed on its own. I wasn't even trying to change my view or my perception of deity or my perception of the world. It was just something that happened organically as I continued to honor the seasons, connect with nature, meditate, find out more about paganism, find out more about the history of the Celtic history and the Norse history, which is my ancestry, and just learning more about how people used to do things rather than how I grew up. And I just felt the love, I felt the freedom, I felt the magic. I felt the coming home to the fact that we're allowed to create the life we wanna create. Our whole purpose being here is to create and realize and wake up to our ability to create and be creators and co-creators. And I felt that Christianity stifled that very much in my upbringing and how I was taught, Christianity was all about. It was like you're a puppet on the string and you're being manipulated by this daddy god in the sky. So it was a huge change and I had to transition. It wasn't just like, bang, I've changed. It was a transition. So has anybody else experienced that? If you're on the path, maybe you're new to the path, or you're thinking about stepping on the path, or you've been on the path a long time and you're looking back and going, yeah, this is what happened to me. Did you experience a transition period between going from one uh, spiritual philosophy or outlook or paradigm to another? So just let me know in the comments or even in the chat as well. It doesn't matter whether you're watching the replay, I still read all of the comments on my videos. So I'm just going to go back now to the chat as soon as I find my mouse and just read what people have said in the chat before it goes too fast. Do Wiccans honor Hecate? Mercury is conjunct Uranus at the moment, and as always, because I'm a Virgo, I struggle with words when Mercury's doing things. So that's happening today. Do Wiccans honor Hecate, or that is a personal choice to work with Hecate? Many Wiccans do work with Hecate, but not all. I was Wiccan for a very long time before I worked with Hecate. But she is a deity that some Wiccans choose to work with, but you don't have to. It's not compulsory. You're Wiccan, you must work with Hecate. You don't have to work with Hecate. You can work with whoever you want to work with. I didn't work with Hecate at the beginning. The covens that I were in didn't work with Hecate either. Okay. I did my first baby leaf spell. I think it went good. Awesome. You'll know it goes good when you get the outcome. I enjoyed Scott Cunningham's book. I read it last year. Yeah. The money spell works great if you use the manifestation tips. Yeah, it is. It's a great little spell. It's such a simple little spell, but it's a really good. It's a good one. Bay leaf. Oh, okay. Oh, bay leaf spell. Okay. I get it now, Shannon. Mary is the feminine of the Catholic faith. Yes, indeed. The White Goddess by Robert Graves, Maiden Mother Crone aspects. Yes, I remember that book was such a big book. Like it was really out there back in the 90s. I went to a Catholic school and church always felt out of place. Witchcraft Sixth Sense by Justine Glass. That was my book. That was the book I read when I was 14. Yeah, and I recently reread it, and it's a lot different to how I remember it. Yeah, I don't think I probably necessarily agree with all of it now, but I was 14 at the time. Transitioned from Mormon to Episcopalian to witch. Yep, that's interesting. That's an interesting transition. Takes a while to deconstruct and move away from the feelings of guilt. Absolutely. And even though I had been practicing the craft and had been involved in spiritual exploration for about over 30 years, there was still some guilt there left over from my Catholic upbringing that I had to deal with. I think it was a few years ago now, but it was still recent. It takes a while, yeah, to deconstruct. When I had my first awakening, junior high school in the States, studied Reiki and aura reading. Awesome. At one time, I used to yo-yo back and forth between Christianity and Wicca. That's not unusual to yo-yo back between things. Oh, it's Anglican. Okay, thanks, Topaz. Yeah, so that was where it sort of started with me. I guess the beliefs that I had before starting Wicca and witchcraft were sort of typical sort of Christian beliefs, but it was very easy for me to open up to the Wiccan concepts. I saw similarities between the two religions, having come from a Catholic upbringing, because there's a lot of magic in Catholicism, and the symbolism in Catholicism has still got some of the occult, a lot of occult symbolism in it, and Catholics still practice magic. There's a lot of candles in Catholicism and lighting candles. If something's going on in your life and you're wanting to uh, change it, then like my mother would go into the cathedral and she'd light a candle to ask, Jesus or Mary for whatever it is that she wanted. So there is a connection to magic with Catholicism. Another thing that I found similar was ritual. There's a lot of ritual in Catholicism and a lot of ritual in Wicca as well. So I saw that there are a lot of connections there. And I guess what I was doing essentially was seeing what was in common between the two, and what was different was actually I preferred the differences that were in the Wicca witchcraft philosophy or cosmology than the Catholic one that I was leaving behind. And I allowed my intuition to lead me. There wasn't any judgment, there wasn't any fear, especially when I just had this organic knowing that the Christian teachings around the devil were not true, and the Christian teachings around God weren't true, and they were just organic things that just happened. It was like a light bulb went off one day. I wasn't trying, it just went off. Aha moments, I guess you could call them. So when I first started, I did what probably most of you are doing, go and search for more information about it. So I went and tried to find all of the books that I could about witchcraft. This is back in the early 90s, no internet, nothing like that. It was all having to go and find books. And at that time, books were starting to come out into more mainstream bookshops, and there were books on magic and very white types of witchcraft back then coming out in the mainstream bookstores. So I was able to grab some books from there. And also, of course, the Circle Bookshop and the Aquarium Bookstore, which were focused on occultism or New Age, had those books too. And so I bought a lot of books from those bookshops and just read as much as I could about it all and started practicing on my own. And I didn't really know where to start. I just went with what was in the information that was there. If a Sabbath was coming up, I would do something from Scott Cunningham's book. If I needed to do some magic, I would grab something from one of the other books that I had that might have had some spells in it, and then tried to figure it all out on my own. Like, what do I do next? What do I need to actually learn to get better at magic? How do I connect more with nature? I always felt that whenever I was in nature, that there was something more real about it. There was a sense of this is the truth whenever I was in nature. And then when I go back into the city, because I grew up in a city with all the concrete buildings and all the concrete and not much nature, it was like there was something fake about it, something not right about it, something very, very cold about it. And coming back to nature was always like a coming back to truth. And even modern Western lifestyles, the things that as Westerners, we're kind of so bombarded with activities. You have to, go to work to earn enough money to do the things that you need to do, put a roof over your head, have family, all of these things. It's like our whole culture is set up to keep us focused on do, 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 and keeping us away from focusing on who and what we really are, and spiritual connection. It's very, very focused on productivity and being a cog in the wheel. And so I found that I'd already had an aversion to that. And coming to the craft allowed me to find the freedom of spiritual practice and the freedom of searching my own way in the world and not having to do what everyone else is doing in order to be able to have a good life, that I could go off on my own path and do things differently to the way that other people were doing it. And I could spend more time working on connecting to nature, spending time in nature, and learning more about magic and how magic could help me create what I wanted to create. So that was kind of what I did at the beginning, just went through all the books and tried everything in the books, but there wasn't any structure to my learning, and it wasn't until I met, my first coven that I got some structure in my learning. I actually got a curriculum in the coven training because they were a training coven. So we had a curriculum, so we knew that, this is what we're gonna do in first degree, and this is what you're gonna do in second degree, and so on. It was like it was all mapped out, so I knew where we were gonna start, what was next, what was next, what was next, and that really helped me. I do like some structure to my learning. I find it helps you learn faster if you've got some structure to your learning. Otherwise, meandering about, there's things you miss, and sometimes you need to know some things before you do other things. So I found that having that structure with my first coven, the solar orb, to be incredibly helpful. And when I was creating the Mystery Witch School 101 Academy, which is my training course, and if you want to know more about that, there's links in the description field. And also, I can grab you a quick link to put into the chat, because I've structured that following the structure of my coven back in the days, like how they taught it, where we started first. And we started with energy work. We started with balancing the chakras, actually, which was called centering back then. It wasn't actually called chakra work. Um, it was basically about working with energy and becoming more aware of things. And I threw in a few second degree things into the Mystery Witch School 101 Academy. So it's a 12-month course of learning Wicca and witchcraft right from the get-go. So you start with something and you've got, then the next month you've got something new on top of that. The next month it builds on top of each other each month, like scaffolding. And I found that having experienced that through the way my coven did it, it was so much helpful to me that I learned so much more. Not only because it was a structured learning that they did, it was also because I was learning from other people, so I could ask questions. And that was incredibly helpful because my high priest and high priestess had over 20 years of experience at that stage when they hived off from their other covens and formed their own coven. So they had a lot of experience there. And my high priest was an occult witch. He called himself an occult witch. So he had quite a bit of a ceremonial experience as well. So he was sort of a blend of ceremonial magic and witchcraft. So he had that experience in his background. And my high priestess was more shamanic in her way of working. So it was having two different ways of working witchcraft kind of blended together. So it was a really wonderful coven. And so having that structure of having the coven, having the community of a coven was really great because we'd go camping whenever there was initiations. We would have the initiations usually somewhere in nature. So we would go camping for that. It might be on someone's property or it might have been in a national park back in the days when we had more camping in national parks. And they were just wonderful because we were experiencing the whole connection to nature. My first degree initiation, I had to spend out in the forest, the bush, as we call it here, by myself overnight. And that was a wonderful experience, even though it poured rain all night and I got absolutely saturated. It was still really wonderful experience being up on top of a ridge and watching the rain come in before I got pelted with rain. So there's all these experiences that I've had as a result of being part of a community. So it is worth being part of a community. If you can't find one physically near you, then Mystery Witch School 101 is a community too. It's an online community. So that's really what I felt when I joined the coven, was just that I had people to ask questions of. There was mentors, there were others that had been in the cohort before my cohort, and people with some experience that I could work with in a structured path along the way, and having people to share experiences with and work together on things, which was wonderful. Now, I'm just having a look and seeing what else I've got written here. I'll just go back to the comments before we go. Connecting to natural energies, a year and a day. Currently working on module 1. Awesome, Holly. Yes. Holly's part of the Mystery Witch School 101. Indeed, I remember from the late 80s and 90s, which month of the year makes you a strong witch? Oh, any month of the year, really. It's no particular month. It depends on what you're here to do if it comes to astrology. Any of the times can be powerful in their own way. Yes, that's right, Andrew. It's all about practice, Luciano. It's about practicing. It's about, head down, backside up, and practicing. It's about turning up for yourself every day and doing a meditation practice and working with energy, connecting to the energy and building your skills. And that's a practice thing. It's a do thing. Some people are born with different gifts in different levels of growth, depending on past lives. So some people are awesome at doing divination and they just seem to have been born that way. I've met people who are so psychic, they're just naturally really good. Others have to work at it. But that doesn't mean you can't get there. It just means you've got to work at it. Others are great at magic and lousy at divination. So some people who are great at divination are lousy at magic. And so they've got to learn to do these things. So you might find that there's things you're really naturally good at and there's things you're not so good at. And so it's the things that you're not so good at, if you want to become better at them, that you do have to apply yourself and learn, because we're not all good at everything. And there's a lot of things that witches are renowned for being able to do. And some of them we have to work hard to be able to do that. Divination is something that didn't come naturally for me. It's I'm very much a thinker, and I get caught in my head with divination. So I had to learn how to listen to my intuition and how to work with the images of the cards when I was doing tarot, because my head just wanted to jump in and go with the logical meanings, but these are the meanings of the cards. And then you'd look at the cards in a sequence and go, how the hell do I interpret this when they're all together? What does it mean? So I had to learn a way of being able to use my imagination and the pictures on the cards to tell a story about what's happening. And when I teach tarot, that's how I teach it. I teach it how I learned it, because that was the only way I could do it, given that I'm very much of a thinker more than a feeler. Okay, we're trained, conditioned to be logical based on evidence. Absolutely, yes. So that can make it difficult for some of us, particularly if we're more of a thinker than a feeler. Okay. So I would say that even though at times I spent probably a good 5 years on the Wiccan path before I moved away from the Covens. I ended up moving away from Brisbane and living down in Canberra. And so I was away from having like-minded people. And I found that during that time was when I started to investigate some other practices, like Buddhism, for example, the work of Gurdjieff, and sort of branching out into other ways of exploring these questions that we often have about life. And I did spend a lot of time within the Buddhist paradigm, but I never really felt that I was Buddhist. There was a time there I was sort of going, well, am I Wiccan, or am I Buddhist, or am I both? But I always knew deep down inside that I was really, witchcraft was my path. I needed a Western path for me. And whilst Buddhism's wonderful and I really respect it as a religion, and if I wasn't a witch, I probably would be a Buddhist, I just find that sometimes it's very difficult to really understand teachings that do actually come from a very different culture And I was really looking, like Gerald Gardner, I was looking for something that had my history, that had my heritage in it, that had my cultural way of thinking and doing and cultural sentiment in there so that I could understand it and connect with it better. And even the Dalai Lama himself has said, it's best you stick to a religion of your own culture because it's going to make more sense in some ways. If you're trying to fit another culture onto you and the way, even the language is different. There's no meanings in English of some of the words that Tibetan Buddhists use. So it's it was wonderful working within that and learning from them, but how do you apply that to more of a Western framework? So that's where I came back to the path. I'd spent some time with a Gurdjieff Sufi group, which started to turn into a cult. I've done a video about that. If you're interested, have a look on the channel to see about my cult experience. And that brought me back to Wicca. Actually, it brought me back to witchcraft, having that cult experience. So that was almost like it was part of my path to have that experience of being almost thrown in the opposite direction to the witchcraft path, because the uh, it started off more as a Gurdjieff group, which is, I mean, Gurdjieff was pretty much Eastern European, very much a Western framework that he was working with people because he was working in France with people. But the Sufism aspect has a very strong Islamic connection, obviously, 'cause it comes out of Islam. And that's just so patriarchal that it was almost like seeing Christianity back in the days of, you know, even further back into the Middle Ages. So that was a real wake up call that, this group was going down a path that there's no way I could go down because I had this connection to the feminine and the feminine in the divine. And also this connection to paganism and magic, which was totally not something you could get away with in that other Abrahamic religion. So I came back to the craft. It brought me back to the craft. And on my birthday, I received almost from the sky. And when I decided I needed to leave, that I had to come home to the craft again, I received an athame and a chalice or a cup, both on the same day on my birthday. It was almost like the god and goddess were saying, "Welcome home. You're ready to come home now. You've been off overseas and you've seen the sights on your travels," which was kind of, venturing out into other cultures and other religions. You've been sightseeing, you've learned what else is out there. Now it's time to come home. And that's what it felt like. It sort of felt like I'd been on an adventure overseas, as you do. You learn about other cultures, you learn about other things, but you have to come home. And so I came home to the craft and I never looked back. And around 2012, I went out to find other pagans again and found a meetup group, which I was part of probably for a good 5 or so years. It had changed over, different people had come in. I ended up being part of the leadership. Then it ended up just being one that I was in control of. And then Mystery Witch School started to come out as a part of that. I didn't really intend teaching. It just seemed to happen. It was something that I didn't really see myself doing apart from the meetup group, which was just a very casual thing. But it seemed to be something that I fell into. And I'd have to say that the way that my practices have helped me is that connection, that feeling, that divine connection, and knowing that all I have to do is ask for help from the goddess, whether that's generically the goddess or whether it's a particular goddess like Hecate, like Tara, other goddesses that I've worked with, Briad, that when I ask for help, the help's there. If I've worked with a god like Cernunnos, the help's there. Even Papa Legba has shown up at times, and I'd never worked with him before. So often the deities will show up at, just left of field. And sometimes you wonder why they're there, because they may belong to pantheons from cultures, I'm not connected to genetically. Who knows, I may have been connected in past lives. But, they turn up nonetheless. And if a deity wants to work with you and you want to work with them, then they're extending the offer. There's nothing wrong with accepting that offer if they are the ones extending their hand. So I started to learn to work with deities. I'd spend a long time in my journey only working with the generic goddess and seeing that the goddess as being generic and the god as being generic. Didn't spend a lot of time working with the god outside of Sabbats. I was always connected more to the goddess. And again, I blame my upbringing for that and the need for me to get back to the feminine because I didn't have it when I was growing up. But since then, I have started to open up more to the masculine aspect and appreciate, how its aspects, the masculine and feminine within everything, including ourselves, and how they work together. And my journey working with the feminine aspect and truly understanding the feminine and the power in the feminine aspect has helped me not only understand the power of the feminine, it's also helped me respect the masculine. And that's a really important thing that I've learned from walking this path is the respect for both the feminine and the masculine. That taking sides is not balanced and it's not the answer to spiritual wholeness or higher consciousness. We have to be able to understand the masculine and the feminine in life, in everything, in this world, because there is a principle of gender and it's within everything in this mundane, in this physical world and energetically. And so I feel the feminine is very misunderstood, that the feminine has been, there's a lot of disservice that's been done to the feminine, even through feminism, because been this belief that for the female to be powerful, she has to be doing what was traditionally a male thing. And that is a total misunderstanding of the feminine and total disrespect of the feminine, because the feminine energy is a subtler energy, it's more covert energy, but it is still a very powerful energy. And learning how to work with the feminine energy is not easy. It's a difficult energy to work with because it is so hidden. It is so hard to know it. But when you work with the goddess, you can find that strength in the feminine. And even in some of the traditional feminine roles from around the world, you can see then where the power is and why a lot of women chose those roles to be in. And then when you start to understand that about the feminine, it's so much easier to understand and respect the masculine energy. And then when you've got to step between the two in your daily life, so you've got to step into that active masculine energy to do things and be in the world, particularly when it comes to working. And if you're following a career, you've got to step into that side of yourself. You have to respect that side of yourself. And then other times you have to work more with the intuition and work more with the hidden aspects, the subconscious, working more of those feminine aspects. So it's when you can respect those aspects outside of yourself, you can respect them within yourself too. And when you're having to be within each one of them to be able to create in your life, because they're creative forces. And as principles, they are creative forces. They create together. So that was a big thing that I learned as a part of being Wiccan, having been Wiccan in covens where both the masculine and feminine were represented, and as deities as well. I know there's a lot of feminist covens out there that came out through the 70s particularly, and probably 80s. I never got involved in those because they felt, for me personally, to just not be balanced. And I was looking for balance. Now, I'll just go back to the comments. Okay. Yep. What is your ancestry? I'm Portuguese on one side and ancestors from the UK, English, Welsh, Irish on the other. So my ancestry, I haven't done DNA testing, but my sister has and my father has. And my ancestry is very much there's quite a bit of Irish in there with my mother's side particularly. There's English, there's Swedish, there's German, there's Swiss, there is some Polish. And that's kind of what I know is there. So that's on my the main things on my mum's side are Irish and English. That's pretty much it on my mum's side. My mum's about 70% Irish, And on my father's side's where the Eastern European comes in and some of the Scandinavian comes in. Yeah. So that's why my interest is in the Celts as well as the Norse. Home is where the hearth is. Yes, and the heart as well. Can anyone help me understand why my whole life everyone yelled at me to not ever get married or have kids? Now I'm engaged. Everyone seems happy about it and supportive. So everyone yelled at you to not do those things, and now they're supporting. Don't know. Don't know the answer to that. I think it's that people like to take sides, and I think particularly when it comes to women, particularly, it's either um, there's the the hardcore feminists that are totally against all of that stuff, and then there's the others that are totally for it. And I think we just have to be balanced and go, what is going to work for me, and it doesn't matter what other people think. I think I'm an eclectic in my faith expression. Yeah, I'm pretty eclectic as well. Okay, absolutely. When you absolve, vanquish prejudices, you open doorways to higher ascension. Absolutely. Okay. Hey, Rosie. It's good that you made it. Do you have any celebrities taking your class? Not that I'm aware of. Um, Interesting ancestry. Does being in a coven feel like you are part of a sort of hive mind, like you get more mental energy? I wouldn't say it shouldn't be like a hive mind in unless you're working together in for a particular thing. So when you come together as a coven and maybe you're doing some healing work for somebody and you're working as a group, or you come together and you're doing guided meditations, and this is what happens in Mystery Witch School 101 Academy. Even though we're doing these things online, often there'll be links between what people experience because we are energetically coming together, and it's like we are together in the same room, even though we're scattered around the world, mostly in the US actually, but and Australia, but around the world. And so there can be connections there, and certainly synchronicities happen amongst coveners because you're used to working together, you get used to each other, and so you do develop more connections energetically with each other. Um, and some people do form hive minds. It's really important to only use that when you need to use it, and then to come back out as an individual after you've done what you need to do, because some covens can turn into cults as well and end up being dysfunctional because of that. So you've always got to maintain your individuality and your critical thinking ability to not get swept away with the emotions of coercion, which can happen in groups. J-Dog needs to join a coven. You can join an online coven, which is Mystery Witch School 101. Okay, so how can beginners find their own path and build confidence if you're a beginner or even if you're not such a beginner? Again, it's learning, learning, learning. If you're at the point where you're only just come to the craft and it's all very new to you, then you do need to do some reading and some research before you commit to anything or any programs or anything like that, because you want to make sure that it's something that you're interested in. Follow people online, like, the Mystery Witch School YouTube channel for a while, and learn as much as you can. And then when you feel that you're ready to learn from other people and join a group, whether it's Mystery Witch School 101 Academy or another group, particularly if you've got one local, then you do that. But don't feel the pressure to do that, straight out of the gate. It is good to have guidance at some stage in your learning, for sure. I needed it, and I know a lot of other people need it. We are social beings, so we learn best socially with each other, and we do often learn better with a structure. So at some point, it does help to learn from other people and to have a structure, but you don't have to rush into that straight away. Just, dip your toes in the water and see how the water feels, and try a few spells, try a few rituals. At the next Sabbath, that's coming up on I don't know if it's exactly the 21st, but the next one's the equinox. Okay, so spring equinox in the US and in Canada and the Northern Hemisphere for that matter, and the autumn equinox here down here in Australia. So, prepare for that. Look up whatever hemisphere you're in, which equinox it is, and plan to do yourself a little Sabbath, even if it's on your own, and see what that feels like. There's heaps of information on the Sabbats online as well as in books. So they're good places to start. I mentioned the how to start your witchcraft practice at the beginning of the live. So that's my free masterclass or webinar, whatever you want to call it, that I have available to you for free. So you just click on the link in the description field below the video and you will go to my website, or you can just go straight to my website, mysterywitchschool.com, and you will have access to links to take you to that free masterclass, and that can just show you what we do, and then how you can structure your own learning along the way using whatever materials you want to use. And it also shows you that if you want to learn witchcraft and Wicca with me and the Mystery Witch School Academy peeps, then I show you how you can do that too at the end of that masterclass. It's also available on my website as well. You can find out more about my courses on my website too. Okay, but as a beginner, that's the best thing to do, and that's the way to start. Do your research, dip your toes in, try a few things, and then start to look for learning more formally. It will help you learn faster and also will help you connect more to your practice. This is something you need to do on a daily basis. So if you can develop a daily practice, I even have a course called The Ultimate Guide to Starting a Daily Practice that works. There's a link in the description field for that. It's a 5-day course. It's only 15 Australian dollars to do it. So it's a real low cost course, and it gives you a 5-day plan to actually teaches you in 5 days how to do a daily practice, which will take you maybe 10 minutes or 20 minutes, depending on how much time you want to do it. And so you've got something to turn up to daily to practice. So that's on my website as well, under the courses tab, and on my front page too, I think, if you want to know more about that. So they're the places to start. Dip your toes in, do a lot of reading, try some rituals, try some spells, find a way of doing a daily practice. Download that Ultimate Guide to Starting a Wiccan Practice that works, and start connecting and do that. And when you're ready, then it's time to find more formal learning somewhere else. Okay. Interesting to see how you became a light worker into witchcraft. Okay. How did it all begin for you? Yeah, it's almost like I feel my path was mapped out in this path because there were significant events that led me. The first real significant one was seeing the woman in the cauldron in that house, and that instant uh, claircognizance to go and get a book on witchcraft and reminding me of that. The next real significant one was when I left that Gurdjieff Sufi group and knew that I had to come back to the craft there, and having the athame and the cup come to me on my birthday. They were significant things, and it was like all of the journey through all of the different spiritualities along the way, even the Catholic upbringing was a part of my spiritual path. And the things that I'd already mapped out I was going to experience prior to coming here in this life. It's almost like I'd mapped that out first and then started to live it. It's how it feels. Okay. We don't worship Satan. No, we don't at all. It's Satanists and Christians that seem to have a close relationship with Satan, whether they have an aversion to him or they love him. It's only those, well, actually 3 religions, because Satan is also in Islam as well. Watch the video from the beginning. Yes. Welcome to all newcomers. Yes, welcome. Great. Thank you. Donimus. I can't spell that, sorry. pronounce that, sorry. Have you been studying? Oh, you're talking to Avan. Okay. Yes, that's in. Tune in. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Awesome. First time being here. Welcome, Avan. Playing sticker games with someone. Okay. Okay. Awesome. So I'm just going to look at what else I was going to say here. Oh, some of the mistakes to avoid. Some of the mistakes to avoid definitely are believing everything that you hear and see, okay? Because it's not all true. And the older Wicca becomes, as in the more common it becomes, the more there are things that are coming out about it that aren't what I learned when I was back in the day. And so just again, keep your critical thinking up and remember to always think for yourself. What I learned from the cult was that you do need to learn to trust your own intuition. And if something doesn't feel right, then have a look at that. Why doesn't it feel right? Is it just simply because of beliefs that you have that may be from the past that may be causing the problem? Or is it simply not right? There's something wrong with it. Particularly if you're getting involved in groups and you feel that the leadership of the group may be, a little narcissistic or, a little bit sort of more controlling, that kind of thing. Um, Also, when it comes to spell work, it's okay to fail. It's okay for things not to manifest straight away. You'll learn as you go that there's lots of reasons why magic doesn't work, and a lot of them just simply have to do with programming and what we believe about ourselves and the world around us. And through shadow work, which is something that you start to do as a part of the craft, but not straight away necessarily, is to understand that our beliefs, what we believe about ourselves in the world, how we've been brought up, our assumptions that we've developed from our upbringing will cloud our relationship to other people, to money, to health. All of these things can be influenced by our beliefs. And when it comes to magic, when you're trying to change these things, so maybe you're trying to bring more money into your life or work on your health or get some more love into your life or have a partnership or something in your life, there may be beliefs there that are actually stopping you from really having what it is that you want. And when you know what those beliefs are and you change them, then the magic will start to flow so much better. You'll learn from the craft that it is an inside job. The magic is an inside job. It comes from you becoming who you truly are. You becoming the person that has that wonderful, loving relationship. You becoming the person that has the financial security. You becoming the person who has the good health. And becoming that, your identity becomes that. And magic is about changing your identity as much as it is about trying to change the outside world. And when we're doing magic, we become what it is that we want to be and what we want to experience. And that's magic is very transformative. So if you do find that your first spells, my first spell didn't work. It was pretty silly. It was to win the lotto. Pretty ambitious. But you know, that's how naive I was about magic, I guess, and probability and that kind of thing. That you learn as you go, and it's okay to make mistakes. It doesn't matter if you knock over the candles. It doesn't matter as long as you don't catch fire to anything and incinerate yourself or anything. Just be careful when it comes to working with fire. That's another thing I've learned. Be very careful working with fire. It's very easy for things to fall over. It's very easy to drop things, and I've burnt holes in the lino on floors and singed my altar from not being, totally careful with candles or fire magic. So there's those sorts of things. If you're doing a ritual and you stuff up, like you say the wrong thing at the wrong time, that's okay. Just keep going. Okay. It's really about the feeling and the connection that's important, not so much what you say that's important. It's all a learning experience. So, uh, so yeah, let me know in the comments, if you're watching the replay, how you discovered Wicca and witchcraft. What was a turning point for you in your journey? Because I'd like to know. And I think before we wrap up, uh, what do I want to say is that, yeah, just keep practicing, practice, learn, make the mistakes. That's okay. Pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and you know, start all over again, or just keep going from where you fell over, and keep going. It's okay too if you fall off the wagon. So while I do propose that you do have a daily practice and you try to turn up for that every day, it doesn't matter if you skip some days. Don't let those days turn into weeks, though. Often, if you skip a day or so, sometimes the guilt in that can actually then stop you from turning up again. Don't worry. It's like meditation. If the mind wanders, you just bring it back. So if you do skip a few days of practice or connection, you just start again. That's all you do. Just start again. Just come back to it the next day and start again. Because that's our human nature, is to wander, and we just have to bring ourselves back to that and release any guilt around not practicing, and then relish the practice that you're doing and how that's changing your life, and keep practicing, essentially. So thank you, everybody. We'll have another live next week, and yeah, blessed be. Oops, I pressed the wrong thing.